What happens when a billionaire tests a black housekeeper he thinks is invisible? Her answer costs millions. On camera. Monday's receipts. They say a good deed does not need a witness. Whoever said that never worked in a penthouse where every motion is recorded in 8K and judged by people who think kindness needs a ledger and a logo. My name is Loretta Mayfield. 58 years old, knees that can predict rain better than any weather app, and a housekeeping uniform I iron to a knife's edge because my grandmother taught me that pressed seams are armor. I work 3 days a week at the top of Peachtree Tower, floor 55, where the ceilings are so high you could park a Pride there and still have room for a sermon. The tower belongs, spiritually, financially, and loudly, to one man, Rhett Langford, tech billionaire, self-appointed philosopher. The kind of white man who thinks grit is something he invented in a TED Talk. That morning, I started my day with a casserole dish in one hand and a borrowed dog in the other. Miss Aura from the 3rd floor had a doctor's appointment, and her terrier, Pepper, had opinions about being left alone. I took Pepper with me so he would not bark the building down, and brought Miss Aura a tin of cornbread I made the night before, because in my neighborhood we trade favors like currency and credit never runs out as long as you keep showing up. By the time I reached the lobby of Peachtree Tower, the air smelled like lemon sanitizer and money. You know that smell. Steel, cold, a little arrogant. The doorman, Reggie, gave me a nod. "Morning, Ms. Mayfield." "Morning, baby." I squeezed Pepper's leash and balanced the casserole. You ever notice rich lobbies never play real music? I could change the whole mood with one James Cleveland record. Reggie grinned. "You'd put this marble to church." Marble needs repentance too. At the security desk, a young guard I had not seen before looked at my badge like it was a counterfeit dollar. He did not look at Pepper or the casserole, just my face. Service elevators around back. Sweetheart, I use the service elevator because it's faster, not because it's where I belong, I said, smiling like a Sunday school teacher who was still deciding if you deserved a cookie. And before you aim that wand at my scalp like I'm a mystery, just look at the screen. My name's on the list. It stays on the list. He stared a second too long. Then he waved me through. That pause, the extra beat, that is how it starts. Not with a slur, with a delay, with a doubt cushioned in courtesy. I have lived long enough to measure those pauses like a metronome. In the service elevator, Pepper settled against my leg, and I checked my phone. My daughter Patrice had sent a photo of my grandson, Jeremiah, winning 3rd place in his school's science fair. A tower made of sugar cubes and toothpicks, and a grin so proud he might float. I saved the picture and whispered, "Thanks." I work in a palace, but that photo was the only gold I needed. The elevator opened to a hallway lined with white oak and art I could not afford to stare at. Madison, the household manager, stood with a tablet clamped to her chest. Madison is 30-something, sharp bob, sharp shoes, and sharper opinions about everything that does not concern her. She always addresses me like I am a friendly appliance. "Loretta? Finally," she said, glancing at Pepper like I had brought a goat. "You're aware pets are not permitted." "Pepper is my emotional support supervisor," I replied. "He supervises me caring about rules that do not help anybody." Madison blinked. "Rhett is hosting a luncheon for the Children's Futures Fund. The table needs to be reset with the Irma's linens, not the fret, and he wants the cufflink display polished." "Understood." I held her gaze until she remembered I am not furniture. Also, I brought a casserole for the kitchen staff, Because sometimes the people who keep the world spinning need lunch. Madison's mouth folded. We have catering. Catering does not hug your insides, I said, moving past her. This does. In the kitchen, I delivered the food, tacked a post-it, for the crew with love, and slipped Pepper a baby carrot, because even small supervisors earn rewards. Then I set to work. Crystal, silver, linen so fine it sighed when you touched it. The dining room's windows framed Atlanta like a painting. Rhett's penthouse was all light and angle and silence that wanted to brag. At 10:30, the doorbell sounded with the small, expensive chime that says you are important, but not loud about it. A delivery kid wrestled a flower wall taller than he was. He was West African by his accent, maybe Liberian, and as nervous as a substitute teacher. Where do I put this? Right here, sugar. I took one end and helped him slide it behind the head table. Take a breath. Rich people break just like clay pots. Don't let the gloss fool you. He laughed, grateful. Thank you, ma'am. Hold on. I handed him a bottle of water and tucked a $10 bill in his neon vest. For lunch, or for a phone bill, or for somebody who needs a kindness and does not know how to ask. Pass it forward when you can. He nodded, eyes wet. I will. As he left, I felt the cameras watch me. Not just the security ones. The living room had white orchids arranged like a wedding, and I could feel them judging too. Madison appeared again, ghost-like. Loretta, Mr. Langford wants to see you in his study. Do I look like a discussion? I flourished a napkin, but my stomach tightened all the same. Rhett only asked for me when he wanted to play chess with people instead of pieces. Rhett's study was a museum of trophies disguised as books. First editions lined the wall, Baldwin, Morrison, and other names I respected in a room that did not respect me back. Rhett stood at the window, all linen and confidence, talking into a headset about quarterly earnings like they were weather. He is one of those men who thinks silence is a trick, and eye contact is a weapon he invented. He gestured toward a chair. Ms. Mayfield, 1 second. I sat. Pepper curled at my feet beneath my uniform hem like a secret. Rhett ended his call and smiled the way CEOs do in commercials. We have a little tradition on Integrity Day, he said, easing into his leather chair. A test. I raised an eyebrow. Integrity Day? Y'all naming it now? Branding clarifies purpose, he replied. All staff are given small hypotheticals, just for fun. See how people think. For the luncheon, I'll ask one of my team a simple ethics riddle. The donors love it. Keeps things human. I want that to be you. Human. The way he said it made my neck warm. You want to ask me a riddle in front of your guests? A playful question. A chance to show character. There's even a bonus for the best answer. He tapped the desk, pleased with himself. $10,000. I looked at the glass-walled skyline. Somewhere down there, my daughter was making spreadsheets sing at the hospital front desk. My grandson was drawing circuits, and my neighborhood was trading rides to doctor's appointments. $10,000 would look good on anybody's table. But some money has fingerprints you can never wash off. What is the question? I asked. Rhett's eyes brightened. Not yet. Spontaneity is the point. Authenticity. Don't overthink it. Overthinking is how I keep a black woman's job, I said softly. But go on. He leaned back. Before we get to that, a tiny exercise. He took off a cufflink and placed it on the desk with a theatrical flourish. Platinum, square, a stone like a drop of midnight. If you found this on the floor, what would you do? I would do what I am about to do, I said, sliding it back across the desk. Return it to its forgetful owner, and remind him that the floors are vacuumed every evening at 4. If his jewelry wants to go on adventures, it should leave a note. A laugh cracked across his face. "You have a wit, Ms. Mayfield." "I have a life," I answered. "Wit is glued to it." I left his study with Pepper trotting beside me, and a sense I had just been measured for a suit I did not order. The luncheon ran like a rehearsal for the afterlife. Too white, too quiet, and everyone pretending they were not scared of judgment. Donors arrived in a blur of perfume and practiced sympathy. I wiped invisible fingerprints from a glass, counted chairs again, and listened to mothers talk about underserved children like they were a trend. When people say underserved, I always wonder who is doing the serving and why the plates keep leaving our tables empty. In the kitchen, I handed out my cornbread. The line cook, Shanice, hugged the tin. "Ms. Loretta, you put nutmeg in your greens again? I can smell you testifying." We were laughing when a shout echoed from the hall. "Kitchen staff!" A security guard I did not know stood with his legs spread like question marks. He was young, buzz-cut, jaw tight like he practiced in the mirror. "Random bag check. Everyone on the crew lines up." Shanice rolled her eyes. "Now?" "We're plating." "Policy," the guard said, eyes sliding over me and stopping. "You, bag on the counter." I set my tote down. He searched like he was panning for gold. Cough drops, a hand lotion, a photo of Jeremiah in his science fair shirt, a tiny Bible my grandmother gave me with notes in the margins. He picked up the Bible like it burned. "What's this?" "Instruction manual," I said. Madison rushed in, whispering sharp in the guard's ear. His eyes flicked toward the dining room, and he moved to the next person. He did not apologize. They never do. Apologies are rare birds in rooms like this. "Y'all always got energy for the wrong hunt," I murmured, repacking my tote. "If you're gonna check bags, check policies, check pay gaps, check assumptions." The luncheon began. Rhett welcomed everyone. "Little secrets keep me employed," I said, and fed. Then came Rhett's favorite part, the parlor trick. "Every year," he announced, "I challenge my team with a thought experiment. Character is not taught. It is revealed. Today, I'd like to invite one of our longest-serving staff, Ms. Loretta Mayfield heads, turned like we were in a tennis match." I stepped to the head of the table, carrying my dignity like another tray. Pepper stayed in the pantry with his carrot. My dignity does not like to share the spotlight. Rhett laced his fingers, amused. "Ms. Mayfield, imagine you find an envelope with $10,000. No name, no note. You live paycheck to paycheck." He smiled apologetically, like poverty was a scenic detour one chooses. "And you have a grandson with big dreams. What do you do?" A murmur rose from the table. It was a nosy sound, like curiosity wearing perfume. I looked at the donors and then at Rhett. "First, I would ask who is laughing," I said. The room changed temperature. Because whoever left that envelope is not generous. They are hunting. The rich love tests. They like to hide nets and then call you a fisherman. I kept my voice mild, my eyes steady. I would turn that money in front of a camera, with a witness who does not owe you anything. I would sign nothing, and I would keep a copy. A few donors chuckled, as if I told a joke. I did not smile. Rhett tilted his head. "And if no one claims it?" "Then it belongs to the person least interested in being seen with it. That is the first hint you are safe." I shifted, feeling my shoes pinch. But the true answer is this. The person asking the question already knows what they want you to do. They want to see if you will entertain them in the process. Madison coughed. Someone at the end of the table whispered, "Spicy." Rhett's face smoothed over. "So you would not take the money?" "I would not accept the insult disguised as a gift," I said. He nodded, eyes bright with a frosty amusement. "Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Always illuminating." The luncheon resumed, but an undercurrent had begun. A few guests watched me with new interest, like I had walked on a piano and played a clean C major with my heels. Others looked offended that I had ruined a game they enjoyed. Either way, I had told the truth the way my grandmother taught me, with polish, with poise, and with a little vinegar so it sticks. After the plates were cleared, Madison cornered me near the china cabinets. "That was bold." "Bold is what you call it when the truth is taller than you expected," I answered. She pursed her lips. "Mr. Langford has one more thing planned this evening, a demonstration at the Children's Futures Gala. He wants you to be available." "Available like a prop?" I said. "Available like staff," she replied, and walked away. By 4 o'clock, the kitchen smelled like thyme and adrenaline. I iced a tray of glasses with the focus of a surgeon. The crew moved as one body. I looked for small joys and found them. Shanice humming "Love Train," the dishwasher telling a story about his baby niece. My cornbread pan scraped clean and shining like proof of something good. At 5, a courier arrived with a velvet pouch. Madison brought it to the study, and then, 6 minutes later, emerged, whispering, "Loretta, in here, please." Rhett stood by his desk holding a ring the size of a sneeze. "For the live auction," Madison said. "The Langford Legacy ring. One of a kind." "Legacy," I repeated. "Big word for something that goes missing in a sink trap if you sneeze right." Rhett smiled. "We are creating a moment. The ring will represent opportunity. I'll pose a question. You'll answer, and the highest donor gets the ring." He handed Madison the velvet pouch. "Simple." I studied him. "Is your question about opportunity for children, or opportunity for you?" His smile tightened. "Ms. Mayfield, you are very good at your job." "I am very good at being alive in rooms like this," I said. He nodded dismissively, which is how men with too much power say they are done listening. 7:30, ballroom. Wear the darker uniform. Cameras love contrast. Cameras do not love anything. Cameras record what people love, and tonight they would record a question wrapped in a ribbon and called civic duty. Before the gala, I went home for 1 hour to check on Patrice and Jeremiah, because balance is a ritual in my house. Patrice was stirring a pot of gumbo, the news playing low on the counter television. Jeremiah worked at the table with his sugar cube tower rebuilt on a cardboard base. "Grandma, look," he said. "I reinforced the arches. It can hold a book now." "Baby, it can hold my heart," I said, kissing his cheek. "And that is heavy with pride." On the news, a segment flashed about a protest on Auburn Avenue. Another young man stopped for a taillight that allegedly winked at the wrong time. The anchor called it tensions, the way people call a hurricane windy. Patrice muted the TV and shook her head. "You good for tonight?" "I am fine," I lied. "They've got a little game planned. I'll be ready." "Don't let them use you," she said. "Honey, I am washable. I go where I choose and leave when I decide." She hugged me tight enough to rearrange my bones. "Call me when you're done." "I will." Back at the tower, the ballroom was a chandelier's dream. Gold chairs, white orchids, mirrors pretending to be more space. The donors arrived again, sparkling like credit limits. There were local officials shaking hands like they were counting votes, TV cameras blinking, and a string quartet that looked too young to have heartbreak in their hands. I stationed myself near the stage with a tray of champagne and a mind like a notebook. I watched how people moved, how they talked around truth. I watched a city councilman give a speech about opportunity with a smile that did not trust his own words. I watched a police captain pose for photos with a child who looked relieved just to be seen. I watched Madison rehearse a cue with the AV team, whispering into a mic like she was coaxing secrets from the air. Then Rhett took the stage. He greeted the room with a sigh that implied humility and a pocket square that said the opposite. Tonight, we invest not only in futures, he intoned, but in character, in who we are when nobody is watching. He gestured toward me. Ms. Mayfield, would you join me? My name traveled through the ballroom like a ripple in a glass. I stepped onto the stage, humanity wrapped in polyester and a pair of good shoes. Madison placed the velvet pouch on a pedestal beside the microphone. Pepper was home by now, asleep on my couch. My courage stood in for him and wagged its tail. Rhett turned to the audience. I like to ask a simple question that reveals our core, he said. Ms. Mayfield has a grandson, bright, ambitious. Imagine a scenario. I held up a hand. With respect, sir, let me imagine it. A hush. Even Madison's tablet stopped breathing. Imagine, I said, looking out at the crowd, you are a woman who cleans a house she cannot afford to look at for too long. You do your job. You do it well. In that house you are seen and not seen. And one day, the owner decides your honesty needs entertainment. A murmur ran through the room, part nervous laughter, part shifting chairs. Rhett smiled his advertisement smile. Ms. Mayfield, the question— I am ready, I said, my voice gentle enough to carry. Go ahead. He straightened just slightly. All right. Ms. Mayfield, if telling the truth in this moment cost you personally, and staying silent protected your livelihood, what would you choose? You could feel the air tuck in its stomach. The ring on the pedestal caught a light and flashed like a sly wink. A cameraman zoomed so close I could see his reflection blink in the lens. I looked at the crowd and saw 100 versions of the same thing. Curiosity scented with doubt. I looked at Rhett and saw a man who had never been told no by anyone who could afford to repeat it. I opened my mouth to answer, and the house lights surged, then dimmed, then surged again, as if the room itself could not decide what it believed. From the back of the ballroom, a security detail moved quickly toward the stage, speaking into their sleeves. Madison's eyes flared, and she mouthed something to the AV tech I could not hear. People shifted, craning to see. A whisper. What is happening? Is this part of the show? Is it a drill? I stayed still. Stillness is a skill nobody pays you for, and everybody notices when you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, Rhett said, the smile freezing. A small technical— The mic popped, and a feed from the hallway flashed on the projector by mistake. Footage of the random bag checks, a grainy angle showing the guard pawing through my tote, my Bible held in his hand like contraband. The room gasped. The projection vanished. The AV tech paled. Rhett recovered in a breath. We will fix the display and continue, he said, trying to sweep the moment into a dustpan. Mrs. Mayfield? Your answer? I looked at him, then at the room, then down at my hands, steady as if they knew something I had not yet admitted. I thought of my grandson's sugar cube tower and how it held more weight the second time because he knew where to reinforce it. I lifted the mic. I would choose— We have only just begun, and the pressure is about to double. Stay with me to see what happens when the test I did not ask for collides with a bigger injustice I cannot ignore. I had the microphone. The room had its breath held like jewelry. A few people clapped, polite, nervous, the way folks clap in church when the sermon has turned from comfort to mirror. Then another sound rose, the soft mechanical chirp of 100 phones waking up at once. Donors glanced down, pretending they were checking the time. But everybody loves breaking news, especially when they are already seated for it. Brett's smile stayed in place, but I saw it need a stapler. "Beautiful sentiment," he said, reaching for his favorite word. "Character." "Let me be specific," I answered, "because character without receipts is just decoration. A few minutes ago, some of your guests saw a hallway camera feed on the projector by mistake. They saw a young guard going through my bag with the urgency most people save for fire drills. That was not security. That was theater. We both know it." A murmur traveled the room like a draft nobody admitted feeling. In the front row, a woman in a silver dress squinted, then turned to the man beside her, whispering fast enough to stir her diamonds. Brett lifted his hands as if he were calming a horse. "We take safety seriously, Ms. Mayfield. Safety is a door that swings both ways," I replied. "When it only opens toward the people with badges and closes on the ones with aprons, that is not safety. That is a stage trick called control." The police captain, he of the friendly photo ops, shifted in his chair. He wore dress blues like a trophy. I saw his eyes flick to the guard who had searched my tote. The boy stared at the carpet, trying to become a pattern. I turned back to the crowd. "Here is my answer to your question, Mr. Langford. If telling the truth cost me personally and silence protected my job, I would still tell it. But I won't pay alone. Not tonight. Not with these cameras. If truth is the metric you sell, then let us measure it properly. Right now." On paper, you could feel the ballroom lean forward, all that money tilting like a ship changing course. "Tonight," I said, "if you truly believe in children, end random searches of household staff. Put it in the handbook by sunrise and back pay. Everyone docked under those integrity checks you love. Pay your interns a living wage so they do not need a second job to afford your lunches, and match every dollar raised tonight 3-to-1 to a board run by the communities you claim to lift, not a board you chair. Put that in writing. On camera. Truth for truth." Silence, the heavy kind. Madison's tablet dimmed in her hands, like even the battery was thinking. The front table, a cluster of corporate donors, looked at one another with the expression rich people get when the price tag has just been flipped to the side they were not ready to see. Someone in the middle of the room clapped once, sharply, by accident. It sounded like a verdict starting. A local reporter, thin mic, big eyes, hair a little too perfect, stood at the back. I recognized her from the 6 o'clock news. She was live on her phone, lips parted, a hand to her ear as a producer shouted downtown. Atlanta was already listening. Rhett considered me, then the audience, then the pedestal with the velvet pouch. If he said no, he would be the man who asked a maid if she loved honesty, and then punished her for agreeing. If he said yes, it would cost him real money. This is how a man finds out whether his brand can lift what his heart cannot. He reached for the microphone, still smiling, but with teeth now. "We are all here for the children," he began, voice smooth as new paint, "and I never shy away from accountability. So yes, I will match every dollar raised tonight 3-to-1. He inhaled, the smallest catch betraying the math sprinting behind his eyes. "We will establish an independent community board by quarter's end, and we will review staff security policies immediately." Immediately. The word did a cartwheel and landed on its knees. The room exhaled into applause. Cautious first, then warm, then hot as people realized they might be clapping for themselves too. The reporter at the back turned her phone so her viewers could eat the moment live. A dozen donors raised bid paddles before there was anything to bid on. A man in a navy tux shouted, "Make it 5-1!" and his date elbowed him in the ribs. But too late. Everyone heard generosity dare itself. Madison flashed me a look I could not read. Respect with a side of inventory. She was already messaging legal, like her fingers had overtime pay. Rhett angled toward me, eyes bright. A quarterback who had just salvaged a bad play and wanted everyone to admire the footwork. "See," he said softly. "Character." I leaned into the microphone, my voice low and easy. "Character is not a pledge. It is a receipt. We'll look for yours." I stepped back, turning to leave the stage, but before I could, a commotion broke along the left aisle. The young guard who had searched my bag stood rigid, cheeks red. A man I had not noticed before. Barrel-chested, suit a size too tight, a badge clipped to his belt that he clearly wanted noticed, blocked the guard with one arm and raised the other, pointing at me. "Hold up," the badgeman said, loud enough to stop a bow. "We need to secure the ring." Everyone turned to the pedestal. The velvet pouch sat there like a closed mouth. The badgeman strode up and planted himself between me and the jewelry, as if I were liable to swallow diamonds between sips of seltzer. "Sir," I said, "the ring is right there. You're protecting it from air." "Protocol," he snapped, lifting the pouch and peeking inside. A lot of people moving around. That was a lie. Nobody had moved except him. But lies love uniforms. They think the tailoring makes them believable. A voice piped up behind him. "Excuse me, did you just search the staff on camera? And now you're treating her like a suspect again?" The woman in the silver dress stood, phone raised. She had the outraged confidence of someone whose Pilates instructor uses her first name in public. "Are you serious?" The badgeman squared at her, then at me. "Ma'am, please sit. I am doing my job." "And I am doing mine," I said, "because at my age, you earn the right to narrate." I turned to the reporter. "You still live?" "Lively," she said, eyes sparking. "Rosa Bennett, Channel 11. We have 150,000 watching and counting. Keep going." The badgeman froze like a deer that had wandered onto a runway and seen what headlights really meant. His eyes slid to Rhett for a cue. Rhett was busy juggling catastrophe in his head. He took the mic again. "Let us proceed. The ring will be auctioned now." The AV tech interrupted, voice trembling through the speakers. Sir, we are trending. Hashtag number sign tested. Her is number 3 in the city. Sponsors are texting." In the audience, the police captain stood to leave, then thought better of the optics and sat back down, fiddling with his cuffs. Optics is the other word for conscience in rooms like this. Rhett forged ahead. Opening bid at $200,000. The Langford Legacy ring represents a decade of... "A decade of what?" a voice called from the rear. It was the delivery kid from earlier, the one I had helped with the flower wall. He stood in a server's borrowed jacket, hair still damp from hustle. Where had he come from? Oh, right. Atlanta's kitchens are stitched together. If you help one, they show up with a ladder when you're reaching high. He held up a phone with a jeweler's certificate pulled up. "Ma'am," he called to me, "is it okay if I say something?" "Say it clean," I said. He cleared his throat, accent softening under adrenaline. "I work part-time for a courier, my cousin's cousin," he added. which is exactly how couriers are connected in this town. We deliver to jewelry appraisers sometimes. If that ring is the one I think, it's lab-grown. Beautiful, but not rare. The legacy is marketing. The badgeman sputtered. Rhett's smile tried to hold a pose on a moving train. Lab-grown is still a diamond, Madison said quickly into a spare mic. Voice professional, trying to put a ribbon back on a box that had sprung open. It is ethical. Nobody here is allergic to ethics, I said. But let us not sell symbolism and call it salvation. A donor near the front stood. Fine. If it is about actual children, not props, he pointed at Rhett. Put the appraised value in cash on top of the match. Quietly. No ribbon, no ribbon cutting. Just transfer. The room hummed like a beehive that had finally agreed what the flowers were for. Rhett's jaw flexed. He looked at me with the smallest shake of his head, not in refusal, but in disbelief that I had walked him to the edge of a cliff and asked him to look down at the river named Consequences. Then he did what men like him do best. He performed grace under pressure. Done, he said, voice steady. Appraised value plus 3-to-1 match. The independent board will be constituted within 60 days. Names proposed by community partners. Transparent governance. And, he added, because pride hates to walk off stage empty-handed, I will seed the board's first operating year myself. 5 million. There it was, a number that made the room blink. It is funny how a syllable can kick your heart. Mill, lions, the music of math and power. People applauded in waves. Some were clapping for children. Some were clapping for the show. Some were clapping because clapping told their consciences they had done something. The reporter's phone nearly slipped from her hand. 5 million, she whispered. Confirmed. I stood still because joy needs a steady chair. I thought of my grandson's sugar cubes and how he had made a structure hold weight it was not designed to bear. I thought of the kitchen crew and my pans scraped clean. I thought of bags searched and policies written by people who had never been searched a day in their lives, except by their own mirrors. The auction was suddenly an afterthought. Donors were writing numbers like they were racing a storm. Pledges mounted. The 5-to-1 fool in the navy tux upped his own dare and grinned like he had accidentally done something holy. Then the flank collapsed. From the side entrance, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the ballroom. They came fast, the way authority walks when it thinks the script is on its side. One spoke into a shoulder mic. The other scanned the stage and pointed. At me. The badgeman waved them forward. There, he said, relief loud in the single syllable. We had a breach around the jewelry. We need statements. Statements? I said, eyebrows lifting to see if my forehead still had elasticity after all these years of holding back words that would have cost rent. Officer, the only thing breached here is common sense. The taller cop tried a smile he must use at barbecues. Ma'am, we just need to ask a few questions away from the crowd. Ask them here, I said. The crowd seems educated tonight. Rhett moved to the edge of the stage, torn between crisis management and the desire to let someone with a uniform reassert the old normal. He looked at Madison, who was busy whispering to someone whose job it was to keep the donors seated and the night on track and the headlines tidy. Ma'am, the shorter cop said, we received a call about potential theft. And you believed it, I said. Without looking at the person who made the call, without checking the footage, without asking who the alleged thief is. You believed it because your day is a long hallway of habits, and this one fits like your favorite glove. A hush. Even the quartet put their bows down. Rosa Bennett, God bless young reporters who still chase truth like it owes them rent, raised her phone higher. Officers, we are live. Would you like to explain for viewers why you are questioning the staff member who just persuaded a billionaire to commit millions to charity, while the alleged breach sits 2 feet from the ring polishing his badge with his own breath? The badge man reddened. The taller cop finally looked where Rosa pointed. The pedestal, the pouch, my visible hands, the absence of anything like a crime, and took a small step back my old track coach would have called the wisdom shuffle. We'll, review the situation, he said, voice flattening into bureaucracy. Apologies for the disturbance. Apology accepted on behalf of my blood pressure, I replied. Next time, bring a better caller ID. They withdrew with the choreography of people who know they have been seen and do not want to be remembered. The badge man followed, muttering into his phone. The young guard lingered at the aisle, looking at me, not with defiance, not with shame, but with the particular ache of someone who has just learned what kind of room he is really working in. The evening resumed its shape, but it would never be the same size. Money kept moving. The pledge board on the projection screen filled like a thermometer in July. The independent board promise swam through the air like a newborn idea gulping breath. The ring itself suddenly seemed embarrassed to be gold, when obligation had just been minted in front of it. Backstage, Madison found me by the water pitchers. You just spent his money. No, I said, letting the paper cup cool my fingers. He spent his own, finally. I simply turned the lights up. She shifted, defenses looking for new chairs. You understand there will be conversations. Conversations, I repeated. Long ones. The kind where people who have never used the service elevator discover it is not a chute to hell, but a hallway to reality. Loretta, she said, and for the first time all day my name sounded like a name, not a label for a function. You were right about the searches. I let them happen, because the donors like the optics of security. I told myself it was neutral. It was not. Nothing is neutral, I said. Even the water picks a side when the levee breaks. She studied me. You are very good at this. At living? Yes, I said. At being tested? Better than average. Madison glanced toward the stage, where Rhett accepted congratulations with the skill of a man who has made a study of applause. He will need you at the press scrum. They will ask you what you asked him. He cannot answer beautifully without you standing nearby to prove the question had weight. I am not a prop, I said. I know, she said quickly. Then, softer. But you are a witness. And tonight, that matters. I thought of my daughter's warning in the kitchen, the muted news about Auburn Avenue, the way the anchor had called fear tension. I thought of my grandson's photo-winning smile and the sugar arches he had learned to reinforce. You do not win every battle with a shout. Sometimes you win it with a sentence and a chair that will not move when they push. Fine, I said. I will stand nearby, but I will not smile for a lie. Deal, she said, failing not to smile herself. We were halfway to the press area when the young guard appeared, hat clutched in both hands like a bird he did not want to escape or die. Ms. Mayfield, he said, voice small and brave. I'm sorry. About earlier. About your bag. They told me that was procedure and I was 22 once, I said. I have broken rules that needed breaking and followed some I should have set on fire. Tomorrow, ask yourself who benefits from your fear. Then, set your schedule accordingly. His eyes glossed. Yes, ma'am. Also, I added, lowering my voice, if you are going to stay in this line of work, Learn to see the whole room before you stop at one person's bag. It is the difference between security and a mess. He nodded, mouth firming, as if it had just been recruited to hold up a new part of his spine. At the podium, Rhett was giving his best performance of accountability. Words like commitment, community-led, and transparency floated on the air like balloons that would either be tied down tomorrow or pop at the first sharp edge. Rosa asked good questions. Rhett's PR handler tried to move her along. Rosa braced her heels and asked anyway. When they pointed a mic at me, I did not rush. Women like me are always hurried. Tonight, I let the pause be mine. "Ms. Mayfield," Rosa said, "what made you speak up?" "Because my grandson is building towers out of sugar they keep telling him are made of stone," I said. "Because the people who clean these rooms know where the dust hides, and sometimes we must say it into the microphone. Because tests without trust are just games, and children have no time for games. They need receipts." "Do you think Mr. Langford will keep his promises?" someone else called. "I think promises are like good dishes," I answered. "You take them out when company is here. What matters is whether you use them on Monday. We will be visiting on Mondays." Laughter. Not the mean kind. The kind that lets air in. The scrum ended with a flash, and the ballroom let out a long, complicated sigh. People found their coats and their consciences and tried to decide whether they had done enough to sleep well. The string quartet packed their instruments with care bordering on devotion. The AV tech sat on the edge of the stage, head in hands, learning a lesson technology never teaches by itself. Every machine is waiting for a human to tell the truth. In the kitchen, the crew was exhausted, giddy, alive. Shanice hugged me so hard my ribs tried to write a complaint. "Ms. Loretta, you did that." "We did that," I said, and started washing my own glass, because solidarity lives in small sinks too. It was near midnight when the ballroom emptied to echoes. Madison found me again. "You can go home," she said, voice softer than the carpet. "You did more than your share." "My share has a pension," I replied. "These floors do not mop themselves when the cameras leave." "I have a team for that," she said, then added, "and a draft policy for the searches. Legal will review at 9. We will need staff signatures. Not for consent." She winced, catching her own reflex. "For acknowledgement. That is how paper starts to act like a promise," I said. As I gathered my tote, Rosa appeared one last time, hair finally a little frizzy around the edges, as God intended for honest women after a 12-hour shift. "Ms. Mayfield," she said, "we are packaging tonight into a morning segment. Would you be willing to come on air? In studio. 9 minutes. Only if you feed me coffee and allow me to say the word biscuit without bleeping it," I said. She smiled. "Deal." I stepped into the service elevator, my elevator, the fast one, the honest one, and let it carry me to ground level. Reggie, at the door, gave me a salute he had never practiced until tonight. The marble still smelled like lemon and money, but it had learned a note of humility, faint and hopeful. Outside, the city was damp with late-night promise. I called Patrice. She answered on the first ring. "Mama, you all right?" "I am all right," I said. "And baby, so are a few children who have never met me." "What did you do?" "I asked for a receipt," I said. They printed one. When I reached the corner, a patrol car cruised by, slow, then slower, then stopped. The window rolled down. The taller cop leaned out, cap off, hairline surrendering. "Ms. Mayfield," he said, putting a name to me now that the comments section had found his badge number. The call came in hot. We handled it wrong. Now you are warm, I said. Do not burn out tomorrow. He nodded. The smallest bow a man can make in public, and still call himself upright. Ma'am. They pulled away. I stood under a street light that flickered like a bad promise trying to be repaired. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Community Board Draft. First meeting invitations. It was from Madison. Attached was a PDF agenda template and a list of names I recognized from the neighborhoods that actually raised children, not just posted about them. I smiled. Then I heard a soft bark. Pepper's sitter lived around the corner from me, and the old terrier must have scented me on the wind. He pulled his walker down the steps like a small tugboat, demanding attention. "Sir," I said, scooping him up, "you missed a show." He licked my nose. Dogs are unpaid therapists, and better than most of the paid ones. I should have gone to bed, but dignity sometimes needs tea. I put the kettle on and turned the radio to something blue and honest. The window hummed with the city's 1,000 small harmonies, buses sighing home, tires on wet asphalt, people on stoops piecing the day together like quilt squares. On the table, I spread my grandmother's little Bible, not for a sermon, but for steady hands. I had tucked receipts and post-its between Psalms and Proverbs for years, grocery lists, doctor referrals, rent due dates. Tonight, I slid a new one in. Receipts for the rich. Mondays. My phone buzzed again. A final message from an unknown number. He's furious. Also, he's already moved money. Millions. Its RI looked at Pepper. If money moves, and it is not walking away from children, I will clap for it, I said. He wagged. Sleep found me in a chair before the tea cooled. I dreamed of sugar towers that did not melt in the rain. In the morning, I would have to be 10 different kinds of careful. Rhett would be making lists of his own. Power does not go to bed just because you asked it a question in public. It tosses. It plans. It calls its lawyers. It tests again. But I had an answer ready for those tests now, and it was not just a word. It was a room that had learned, under lights, to listen. And dawn was already sliding its hand under the curtain. We are at the edge of the storm. The promises are on paper, but power is already sharpening its pencils. Stay with me. What happens next will flip the table you thought was bolted to the floor. Morning TV lights do not care how late truth went to bed. They ask for powder and punctuality, then point at you like a question mark with a deadline. Rosa's studio sat on a corner that had watched a dozen mayors promise a dozen renaissances. I rode the bus because pride rides public transit when it wants to remember what matters. In the green room, a young producer handed me a mic pack and a cup of coffee like they were issuing armor. "We're leading with you," he said, fingers jittering. "Phones blew up all night. And tested. Her is still trending, and someone started receipts on Monday. That's yours, right?" I said it in a room that needed to hear it, I told him. If a hashtag puts on work boots, I will not complain. Eel. On air, Rosa asked clean questions and let my answers breathe. I talked about my grandson and sugar towers. I talked about bag checks that were not about safety, but about reminding certain people their place had a trap door. I talked about the joy I felt when money finally moved toward children instead of toward ribbon cuttings. And I said the sentence that turned into a crawl at the bottom of 1,000 televisions: promises are good dishes. Use them on Monday. By the second commercial break, the station manager slid Rosa a note. She lifted her eyebrows, pleased and a little scared. "Corporate wants a longer segment," she whispered. And, "This just in, 3 major sponsors tell us they'll follow your Monday metric publicly. They'll publish their receipts. I smiled, careful. Tell them to bring pens and neighbors. Back at Peachtree Tower, Reggie greeted me with a thumbs up that could have lifted a Buick. Ms. Mayfield, you a celebrity now. Celebrity is a spotlight. I am a broom, I said. Brooms work better when the light is on. The lobby had the quiet of a church between services. Something big had happened, and the walls were deciding whether to believe it. On the 55th floor, the air smelled like citrus and strategy. Madison waited outside the study, spine straight enough to measure crown molding. He wants to see you, she said. I assumed, I replied. Men like Rhett never let a narrative get too far without trying to climb on it. Inside, Rhett stood by the window with his jacket off and his fortune calculating behind his eyes. He gestured to the chair. Ms. Mayfield. Mr. Langford, I answered, sitting like a witness, not a defendant. He went straight to it. Last night was expensive. Expensive is when you pay for appetizers and pretend it is dinner, I said. Last night you bought groceries. A flicker of a smile, quick, involuntary, then gone. Legal drafted something for us. He slid an envelope across the desk. A formal apology from my office and the security contractor. Policy changes. A commitment timeline. And a separation package. Generous. You can transition with dignity, full benefits, and a non-disclosure clause that protects both of us from media circus. There it was. The offer this city knows so well. Money for silence. Dignity on a leash. I did not touch the envelope. I do not rent my voice, I said. And I certainly do not sell it wholesale. His jaw flinched. Ms. Mayfield, you spoke beautifully. But this is a company. There are procedures, stakeholders. Stakeholders can learn to hold the right stakes, I interrupted. You asked me a question about truth. I answered. It cost you millions because your brand depends on the idea that you like truth. The only way to make last night cheap is to buy my silence today. He exhaled through his nose. What do you want? Receipts. That was the easy word, but the list had to be precise enough to make paper act like a promise. First, I said, counting on my fingers so he could see this was not improv. The end of bag checks for household staff unless there is a specific, documented cause. That policy published. Training that does not use perception of threat as a fig leaf. Back pay for every hour stolen by those searches. Done, he said, a little too fast. The lawyer in the wall clock coughed. Second, wages. The bottom of this house makes the top shine. Raise hourly pay $2 across the board. Retroactive to the start of the fiscal year. His eyes narrowed. The calculator behind them threw sparks. I can do $1. This house burns $2 in candles at dinner, I said. 2. He weighed optics against spreadsheets and nodded once. Fine. Third, the Independent Community Board is not a prop. You seed it with $5 million as promised. It controls the match. It sets grant criteria. It publishes minutes. Agreed. Fourth, internships. Pay them market rate. Recruit from the schools you only visit for photo opportunities. Transportation stipends included. He frowned. His brand liked the word pipeline, but it did not like actual pipes it could not decorate. So many details. Truth lives in details, I said. And finally, your security contractor. Replace them. I have proof their bag checks were spectacle, not safety. His eyebrows flicked. Proof. Right on cue, the young guard, tie straight, courage steadier, stepped into the doorway with Madison. He held a flash drive like a candle in a vigil. Madison spoke first. Rhett, the contractor sent an internal memo last month. Visible security moments reassure donors. Select staff for compliance drills accordingly. She swallowed. They listed Loretta by name. My name, in their memo. I felt heat rise from the floor, not rage, but clarity, a flame that warmed resolve instead of burning it. Rhett took the drive, his mouth a hard line. "Leave us," he told Madison and the guard. When they were gone, he stared at the window for a long beat, then back at me. "I did not authorize this." "That is the trouble with machines you build to run your image," I said. "Sometimes they run over people while you are busy reading your own press." He nodded once, unhappy with the truth, but not refusing it. "All right, I will kill the contract, effective immediately." "Not killed," I said. "Replaced, with a firm trained by community groups who live with the consequences when security goes wrong. People who know there is a difference between a threat and a person carrying a lunch." He rubbed his temple. "You came prepared." "Monday has a long to-do list," I said. He pulled the envelope back toward himself, tapped it, then slid it to the side. "What about your role? You cannot be both staff and the face of a movement against my excesses. It is a conflict." "I agree," I said, "which is why I will not be your maid anymore." Saying it did not break me. It set a bone that had been crooked since the day I learned what dignity costs in rooms where your name tags you as invisible. I stood. "I will serve 2 weeks to transition my duties. I will train whomever you hire. Then, if the community board wants me as a paid advisor, I will consider it. Not for optics, for outcomes, because children are not hashtags." "You would leave after 22 years, he said softly. Not angry. Something else. The light of the city painted his face complicated. "I would move forward," I replied. "There is a difference." He did not offer his hand. I did not offer mine. We had paper to write first. The next 48 hours were a parade of consequences, with marching bands on both sides of the street. The contractor was fired before lunchtime, their statement written in the careful voice companies use when they are sorry they were caught, but trying to sound sorry they were wrong. Comments were not kind. Legal drafted policy language and sent it to staff phones with a note. "Acknowledge receipt." The kitchen posted it by the time clock with tape that looked like it had been asked to carry meaning and complied. Donors who had clapped like they were attending a Broadway show now called Madison, with questions that sounded like accountability, wearing pearls. Some pulled out, some doubled down, some asked for seats on the new board, and were told, politely, and for once accurately, that the community would decide that. The stock of one of Rhett's companies dipped 2 points before lunch, then rose a point when he went on financial TV and used words like governance and risk mitigation, the way surgeons use gauze. Nobody mentioned me by name. They did not have to. I was the gravity in the room. The police captain who had posed for photos at the gala held a press conference about retraining. The union rep beside him looked like someone had handed him a vegetable at a barbecue and asked him to enjoy it. Rosa's station covered it with split-screen footage from the bag check projector mishap. The anchor asked, "Why now?" It was the right question. He did not answer it well. My church, holy ground and carbohydrate heaven, sent a tray of after-service pound cake to the Peachtree kitchen with a note, "To the staff who keep the angels from slipping." The crew cut slices thick as policy paragraphs. And yes, sir, Rhett moved money. Wire confirmations leaked like polite rain. One sponsor matched the match and called it competitive generosity. Another sponsor quietly funded a reading room in a zip code that had only seen reading rooms on TV. A third tried to name a scholarship after themselves and got gently told to sit down by women who had raised 3 generations on PTA budgets. The backlash came too, as it always does. Anonymous comments about ungrateful staff, emails suggesting I had embarrassed the cause, a conspiracy thread claiming the ring had been switched by activists, which would have been funnier if it had not been angry. I did what I have done for 30 years when ignorance knocks. I let it tire itself out on the porch. The only part that threatened to climb inside my house was a letter from a lawyer with a jaw for a last name. The letter accused me of defamation by implication. It suggested that if I kept talking, I would face remedies. Remedies is how some men spell revenge when they buy their pens in bulk. Rosa's phone blew up that afternoon. She forwarded me 6 pro bono offers from law clinics that knew a landmark when it walked past their windows. I did not need a courtroom. I needed a table. So I asked my pastor if we could use the fellowship hall on Friday night. He handed me the keys and a stack of index cards. We called it a Monday meeting on a Friday, because words are cheaper than chairs, and sometimes you need to trick people's schedules into doing justice. Parents came with toddlers on their hips. Interns came with notebooks too clean to trust, but good intentions anyway. Staff from the tower came in their off-duty jeans, eyes bright and fearful and proud. Madison came with a lanyard turned backwards, which is as close to humility as some people know how to dress. We set out coffee and pound cake, and a sign-in sheet titled, "People Who Know Where the Dust Hides." We listened more than we talked. A janitor from a museum described metal detectors pointed only at the people who did not buy memberships. A cafeteria worker from the courthouse told us about random spot checks that were never random. A bus driver explained how fare enforcement could turn into a theater of humiliation if you were the wrong color with the right route. We wrote it down. We drafted a Monday checklist, policies that must be public, complaint lines that must lead somewhere other than voicemail, training videos that included the faces who had been trained by violence, not by PowerPoint. We sent the list to the board in progress and CC'd the mayor's office and 3 reporters whose voices did not wobble when you said accountability. Then we posted it online with our hashtags and a link to a calendar of meetings in rooms with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. Somebody asked, "Should we invite Mr. Langford?" The room shifted, unsure. "We should invite anyone who is ready to work," I said. "Titles do not get you a seat. Work does." On Monday. Never has a weekday earned its capital letter so righteously. Rhett walked into the fellowship hall. No entourage, no spotlight, no tailor hovering with pins. He wore a navy sweater like he hoped to look like a person. The first row did not clap. They moved jackets, so he had a place to sit and a place to be measured. We handed him the checklist. He read it without pretending to recognize every acronym that had birthed itself in the help-wanted ads of the city's conscience. When it was his turn, he stood, cleared his throat, and said, "I do not expect forgiveness for a system I let run, because it made my life easier. I expect to be told what to fix, and to be held to it." Then he sat back down and kept his head pointed toward the front of the room like a student who finally understood the point of school. Transformation is a word committees love. I do not. It suggests butterflies, like the caterpillar did not have to crawl and risk 100 shoes. Do not call what I saw transformation. Call it a man learning to shut up in public and write checks with names he did not choose. It is humbler than metamorphosis, and more useful. The contractor sent me one more letter, this time apologizing for targeted selection in their bag checks. They offered me a settlement that could have bought a small car with a good warranty. I asked them to fund a pilot for community-based de-escalation training instead, staffed by grandmothers and doormen and bus drivers and nurses who know what a crisis looks like before it puts on a uniform. They agreed, because sometimes the quickest way out of shame is through a good idea you should have had first. 2 weeks later, I hung my uniform on the back of my bedroom door and patted it like a shoulder. "You protected me," I told the cloth. "Now rest." I left my locker at the tower cleaner than the conscience of a man who finally pays his debts. I wrote a note for the woman who would come after me. People will mistake you for invisible. That is their weakness, not yours. The fastest elevator is the one you build in your mind. Use it. LM. The community board met in a library branch where the children's section smells like safety and glue sticks. They voted to hire me part-time as a community accountability advisor. The pay was not grand. The dignity was. My job description had one bullet point. Ask the right question into the right microphone. I signed, then I went to Miss Ora's appointment with Pepper's leash, because titles do not excuse you from being a neighbor. On a Saturday, the foundation held a small ceremony on Auburn Avenue. Not a gala, a gathering. No orchids, just folding chairs and sunlight. We unveiled a plaque that said, "Community Board of the Children's Futures Fund, governed by the neighborhoods it serves." A line beneath it, smaller, but not shy. Receipts posted every Monday. Folks clapped the way you clap at baptisms and long-awaited planes landing. Rhett was there, in the shade, not at the podium. He asked me if I had a minute. He offered no envelope. Good. He held out a ring box, smaller than the velvet pouch from the Gala, cheaper on purpose. Inside, a simple circle of silver, nothing that would break a policy or impress a camera. Engraved on the inside, "Use it on Monday." "A reminder," he said, "for me." "For all of us," I corrected. "We'll keep you honest." "I know," he said, sounding like someone who was almost grateful to be kept anywhere that meant he slept better. Jeremiah ran up with a flyer for a robotics camp the board had funded. "Grandma, they have scholarships." "Apply," I told him. "Write like you are already building the future, because you are." He nodded, serious. Then he looked at Rhett with the frank appraisal children use because they have not learned the tired dance of pretending. "Are you the man from TV?" "I am," Rhett admitted. "Are you nicer in person?" my grandson asked. Rhett took a breath he did not fake. "I am trying to be better than the person on TV," he said. "Ask me again on Monday." We laughed, the good kind. When the sun tilted, I went home to stir a pot and count blessings. The city hummed like a choir that had learned a new harmony and liked how it sat in the throat. My phone buzzed with receipts, actual PDFs, from sponsors and bureaucrats, and one school principal who attached a selfie with a stack of new laptops and a caption, "Mondays." I took Pepper for a walk, watched the children on our block race scooters like they were chasing history, and thought about tests. There are tests you study for and tests that study you. A man with money tried to study me. He learned something. It cost him millions. It earned some children a chance. That is not a fairy tale. That is a transaction. Honest at last. At night, I set my grandmother's Bible on the table and slid a final note into Proverbs. When asked a small question, answer with a large truth. I turned off the lamp and let the dark be friendly. Morning would come with more lists and meetings and cameras and pushback and sandwiches Eaten too fast in rooms with bad coffee and good people. I am not dismayed. I have a broom, a microphone, and a Monday. And that is enough.